Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. It's late in the evening of what's been, I'm sure, a very, very busy day for all of you. My name is Kaveh Zahidi. I'm the Director of the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, FAO. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to this event on agri-food system transformations to achieve triple wins for people, for climate, and for nature. I think it's a very timely conversation. We see a lot of momentum building, including here at this COP, around the discussion of agri-food system solutions and how agri-food system solutions must be very central to delivering on climate promises. Yesterday, many of you were present at the launching of the COP28 declaration, the Emirates Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems and Climate Action, something that's been signed up to already by over 130 countries. But this was not the beginning of the conversation on the role of agriculture within climate and as climate solutions. More than 90% of the countries include agriculture in their NDCs. So already, of course, the countries themselves are fully aware of the role of agriculture, both in terms of the need to adapt and build resilience, but also from the perspective, of course, of reducing their emissions. We've seen momentum building from previous COPs, both within the official process of negotiations and in the presidency initiatives. At the last COP, the Egyptian presidency launched their initiative, the Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation, the FAST partnership, that is now, again, a part of the conversation at this COP, because it's about how to make sure that the necessary investments are flowing towards the agri-food system solutions that can help with climate change, that can help with biodiversity, and of course, that can help with food security. So, this is going to be our conversation today. Where does agri-food systems sit in delivering solutions? Solutions for climate change, solutions for biodiversity, and of course, solutions for food security. How do we produce more with less? And to start us off on our conversation this evening, I'm delighted to invite Dr. Chu Dongyu, Director General of FAO, to please take the place at the podium and offer his keynote remarks. Dr. Chu, over to you.
Thank you, Kevin, and also welcome to Undersecretary. And she's also champion for Seeds, LDCs, and herself original from Bangladesh. So, and my younger brother from the YPARD. We didn't meet so often, but we do often meet in the international meetings. So, and also welcome all of you, and end of the day, who stay here should be champion of the staff. I think if by Chinese incentive system, I will give you $1 bonus. But the UN, they have no incentive. So I really appreciate that you can still manage to stay. You see, that's the first 4 room today I faced. Unbelievable. So we are really deliverable. Please tell your members, our members, at least the UA, FAO, and YPARD work hard for the members and for the donors, for the farmers, of course. Achieving the 2030 agenda and the SDG is only possible if we transform our agri-food system and to be more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable. The transformation that is the urgent need to ensure the nutritious healthy diet for 7 billion people today and probably 10 billion by 2050. Actually, now it's already 80 billion, not 7 billion, I remember. Yeah. And transformation that ensure the just transition for the 80% of the global rural poor who depend directly or indirectly on the agri-food system for their livelihood. A transformation that empowers and provides decent employment to more than 1 billion people employed by the sector worldwide. Look at where we are today, over 700 million people living in hunger. and especially, who are in the suffering in the hotspot, humanitarian crisis in Gaza or in other parts of the world. So agriculture is not only food, it's basic human rights to get food. The FAO estimated the hidden cost of agricultural food systems on our health, environment, society to amount at least $10 trillion a year. So recently, FAO, first ever, we published the real cost of food. It's not only realized the direct cost of economically, environment, and other indirect costs for society. So we should get the data first, and then how to fix the challenges and problems together. But we have not come here to set out all the challenges. You are well aware of them. I have come here with a clear message and a positive message. Agrifood solutions are climate solutions. They are also solutions for biodiversity, poverty elimination, and health planet, health people. And that's why I salute the organizer of the COP28, first time put the agrifood and rural development on the stage. Yesterday we had a World Climate Action Summit focused on the agrifood and rural development. It's a big turning point, in my opinion, for the COP history. But personally, when I was a scientist as a vice president of Chinese Academy of Agriculture, I involved in several technical meetings of COP. But this one, I think it's a really turning point. So for all of us, because agrifood, as I said, it's a solution now. Because you need the solution rather than just talk the problems, challenges, every time repeatedly with some new data. So also for the coming seeds and LSD summit, we need mostly, like the Secretary General Antonio Guterres mentioned several times, if you look at all the LLDC's members, they are fully, majority depend on the agri-food system. Because from the GDP, $1,000 to $5,000 per capita, one of the major game change for transformation of economy and the graduation from LDCs depend on agri-food system and the rural development, of course. So FAO, we want to work together with you under the new strategy frameworks endorsed by Ministerial Conference of FAO 3 years ago. Now we need the international partners and hand in hand to deliver, implement our strategic framework and with relevant strategies together. And I think we need to side the enabling policy and also through the consultation. Second, we need the responsible investment. And third, we need the science innovation. But more important, we encourage all of you, no matter you're public or private or academic institutions, to take the ownership and then build a more strong and concrete partnership. So I said just before I come, the previous meeting, AMR issues, if the members and all the relevant partners, you didn't take ownership. FAO, YPARD have some money, but we don't have money. Eh? UN also, they even have less money because, and we need you take the partnership, ownership first, and then build more strong and closer ownership. And then we need to scale up, speed up the process of SDGs and also the solutions which now is possible. Because with the new technology, especially digitalization, just early this afternoon, we had also this room, we had the IT solutions for digital economy and digital agriculture and the food and the digital rural development. So and the last but not least, also we need to look at the holistic way. People, planet, and prosperity. That's why the SDGs professor said that 4P, and then through the partnership. I think for that, I wish all of you to use this COP28 to take our own part and to work together with the relevant partnerships and then make the game change as Secretary General rightly pointed out, and during the opening speech. And let's walk the talk, and with tangible results in the years to come. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director General, for your clear and inspirational words. It is about getting the investments to where they are needed the most, guided by science and accelerated through innovation and agri-food system solutions. And thank you for setting us up perfectly for the conversation this evening. And nowhere is the need more acute. Nowhere is facing these sort of multiple challenges of climate and biodiversity and food security more, of course, than SIDS, LDCs and NLDCs. And that's why we're so honored to have Ms. Rabab Fatima, who is the Under Secretary General of the UN and High Representative for the least developed countries, landlocked developed countries, and small island developing states, to deliver her keynote speech. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kaveh. Director General of FAO, my good friend, Mr. Chu Donju, Mr. Alvaro Lario, President of YPARD, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, dear friends and colleagues. I thank the organizers for inviting me to speak on this very important topic. My office supports 92 of the most vulnerable countries, the least developed countries, the landlocked developing countries, and the small island developing states. And there is no greater challenge facing these countries than the alarming rise of food insecurity. I shall focus my remarks briefly on the situation in these countries and offer some ideas on the way forward to overcome the dire challenges that these countries are facing. And I would again like to thank you for organizing this meeting. It's so very important. Distinguished colleagues, 1/3 of all food insecure people live in the LDCs, the least developed countries. More than 277 million people. In the landlocked developing countries, food insecurity increased from 43.4% in 2015 to 57.9%, so it actually went up in 2022. And in the small island developing states, it increased from 7.6% to 11.3%. So the trend is the growth. This is largely due to the worsening impacts of climate change. The biodiversity loss also has serious consequences to our food supply, livelihoods, and environmental health. Loss of diverse species, crucial for the health of soil and control of plant pathogens, directly impact food systems. In the least developed countries, climate change and biodiversity loss has already brought about dire consequences. It has been estimated that over 34% of crop and livestock production loss in LDCs is traced to drought, costing the sector overall $37 billion. Floods are responsible for a total of $21 billion in losses, representing 19% of total losses attributable to climate change. Between 2008 to 2018, extreme storm surges, such as tropical hurricanes, have caused more than $19 billion in crop and livestock production loss in the least developed countries, including many landlocked developing countries that are also least developed countries. In fact, of the 32 landlocked developing countries, more than half of them are also least developed countries. For the landlocked developing countries, the situation is equally challenging, magnifying structural challenges such as the lack of direct access to the sea and isolation from global markets. 2/3 of their population is still dependent on agriculture. As such, shifts in local climates and biodiversity loss are impacting their agricultural and forestry sectors, leading to reduced crop yields, increased food insecurity, and rising poverty levels. In addition, Many LLDCs, the landlocked developing countries, are in dry land regions where the impacts of climate change, desertification, and land degradation are more pronounced. 54% of the land of the LLDCs is classified as dry land, 54%, home to about 60% of their population, thus making their food systems extremely vulnerable to global warming, desertification, and land degradation. Small island developing states, the SIDS, are on the front line of climate change, facing existential threats from rising sea levels and increased frequency of extreme weather events. The rich biodiversity of these lands, including coral reefs and coastal ecosystems, is under severe threat. The degradation of these island ecosystems not only affect the natural beauty and biodiversity of these nations, but has profound impacts on local communities whose culture and livelihoods are deeply intertwined with the natural environment. Lower than expected production resulting from climate disasters between 2008 and 2018, in that decade, had devastating consequences for the SIDS in both the Caribbean and the Pacific. In the case of the former, the loss in absolute terms represented up to 14% of potential production. Distinguished colleagues, excellencies, climate change and vulnerable agri-food systems are intrinsically linked in LDCs, LLDCs, and the SIDS. They don't have the means to tackle the dire consequences of climate change and biodiversity loss. We must enhance collaboration and partnership at every level to make sustainable and resilient agri-food systems a reality for these countries. We should prioritize for them enhanced financial support and investment, vital for advancing sustainable agricultural practices, climate resilient crops, and the necessary infrastructure that is the basis of robust agri-food systems. Allow me to conclude by highlighting 3 points. First, the Doha Program of Action for the LDCs called for establishing a system of food stock holding for the LDCs, aimed to provide a safety net during periods of extreme food insecurity and emergencies in the LDCs. The UN Secretary General called for operationalization of a food stockholding system for LDCs in his call for action at the UN Food System Stockholding Moment held in Rome earlier this year in July. We are engaging closely with my dear friend, the champion of the LDCs, LLDCs, and the SIDS. We are engaging very closely with FAO and other key partners to bring this system to fruition. Second, we need to scale up investment in resilient infrastructure and access to modern and sustainable agricultural technologies, coupled with training and capacity building for local farmers and businesses. Significant investment is also needed in early warning systems, as well as agricultural and agri-business insurance. Lastly, dear colleagues, the upcoming 3rd United Nations Conference for the landlocked developing countries and the 4th International Conference for the small island developing states, both to be held in next year in 2024, offer important opportunities for meaningful change, new partnerships, commitments, and concrete deliverables. In the Doha conference, we got a concrete deliverable for a food stockholding mechanism. Both those conferences also offer an opportunity to come up with concrete deliverables for a more sustainable and resilient agri-food system for these vulnerable countries. Excellencies, dear colleagues, we must translate plans and pledges into action to tackle this most urgent and complex issue by working together, and I'm very, very closely working together with FAO, IFAD, and other colleagues. It is very, very important that we work together, but we would also like to work with organizations at the ground level, at the national levels. I'm convinced that if we work together, we can bring about transformative change in agri-food systems of the most vulnerable countries, fulfilling our collective promise to leave no one behind. I thank you very much for your kind attention and for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Under-Secretary General, for those remarks. I mean, you've reminded us that SIDS, LDCs, LLDCs are in many ways on the front lines of climate change. I guess that going by the same logic, then the agricultural communities, the smallholder farmers, are on the front lines of the front line, the most vulnerable, and definitely need the support that only in some way Agrifood system solutions can provide. But the most important ingredient there, one of them certainly, is finance. And our next speaker, Dr. Alvaro Lario, the president of IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development. I guess you are the fund of hope for these smallholder farmers. So Dr. Lario, I invite you to take the floor, please.
Good evening, everybody. Dr. General, Director General Chu, Undersecretary Fatima. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I think it's a very good moment. Thank you for coming to this discussion after yesterday's leaders' declaration, which was a very strong political signal. As my colleagues were saying, I think now we need to go from words to action. For us, as an example, today we launched an Africa Climate Risk Management Facility, a blended facility, which was a mixture with the private sector, half coming from the private sector, half from multilaterals, equity bank, and some de-risking. I think that's what we need for climate adaptation, to find facilities that actually can really make this happen. At the global level, I think the title is very good. I mean, it's a false trichotomy. I think we cannot have the leaders of the global south have to choose between people or planet, developing their own economies or actually saving the planet. That's a false dichotomy. And we also need to work with nature. So it's one of the things that has been clear, is that it's not food systems on one side, nature or climate on the other. It all needs to come together. So we also know that the current trajectory in terms of climate change is not positive. We will very surely go beyond the 1.5 degrees before 2030. This is going to have massive impact for agriculture, for food systems, in terms of productivity, in terms of yield, but in terms of how many of the small-scale farmers are working with nature and with water. It will affect us, all of us, that's very clear, in the developed economies too. But for them, it's an existential threat. That's their livelihood. And I think that's why we should be giving a priority to adaptation. We should be giving a priority to investments in people. There's enough money for mitigation. There's enough money for private sector. What we are not seeing is that flow of money actually coming for climate adaptation and for the small-scale farmers. Our current food systems are degrading the natural environment. They are not only affected by climate change, they are also contributing to it, and we have to acknowledge that. And they are also they're failing to provide healthy diets. We're seeing more and more obese people, more processed foods, less healthy foods. At the same time, as I was mentioning, there's systemic inequalities, especially for small-scale farmers and for rural people who are not making a decent living out of it. So even if we ask them to invest, to be there, they get 7 cents out of every dollar. So it's just natural that they are fleeing, they're migrating. So these food systems we have currently, they are unfair. They are inadequate to meet the needs of the people, and that's why we need to transform them. And the cost to transform, we also know it. It has been, there's a lot of analysis from World Bank, FAO. We're talking about 350 to 400 billion per year. That sounds enormous. It's an enormous figure. But let's look at what other financial flows are there. We're talking about every year 700 billion of subsidies. Imagine if those were incentivizing the right incentives, the right production, the right consumption. We are talking about 6 trillion in terms of health costs when we're talking about unhealthy diets. We're talking about 3 trillion in terms of environmental damage. This is the type of cost we are discussing. The urgency is very clear. I mean, in the developed world we see it, but in the developing economies and in the projects that we have all over the world it's even more clear. COVID-19, if anything, has just triggered the very clear acknowledgement that many countries and many of their food systems and many of their food production is not suited. It's not normal that you have a shock in one part of the world and it's affecting the livelihoods, the food security of hundreds of millions of people somewhere else. So concentrating production, concentrating crops, it's not the way forward. That has been very clear. And now we need to make sure that just like in Europe or in the US, where food security is a matter of national security, also Africa, in the Southeast, makes food security a matter of national security. For that, we need sustainable food systems. We need also small farms. And small farms need to have also farmers which are decently paid and who also can lead decent livelihoods, because they are also part of the solution against climate change. Profitable, and I mentioned profitable small farms, are the backbone of many of the rural economies where poverty is located. To make really food systems truly sustainable, inclusive, fair, to all small producers can also have a lot of benefits in terms of avoiding forced migration, in terms of avoiding conflicts over resources. We know that this investment, for every dollar you invest in this, you can also prevent up to $10 actually in humanitarian and emergency assistance. So as president of IFAD, I tried to get, as the Director General Chu was saying, to all of the fora to really make sure that all of the leaders understand that what are the true costs of having the current food systems. For us, this year is also a replenishment year. We're seeing a lot of important contributions from many of our members, but this is clearly not enough. As I said before, we need to find solutions that also bring the private sector. The flows, if you look at official development assistance, just generally, all of the official development assistance in the world every year, it's 200 billion. Agriculture is 5%, 10 billion. That's peanuts. That's just a drop in the ocean. So it's very clear that we need to find ways of attracting other flows, including domestic, local private sector, not just multinationals. We cannot wait for another COP to make these changes. I mean, millions of small-scale farmers, millions of rural people are waiting for our action to have a decent livelihood. And I think that's what we are discussing here today. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, President Alvaro Lario, for your words. I think you've set the stage perfectly. It's not just about this incredibly difficult systemic transition, but making sure that it is done in a just way, and to do that requires major investments going beyond what we often talk about in COPs with the 100 billion and the public funding to the private sector, to the capital markets, and of course IFAD is at the very, very forefront of that. So thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, so I think the first three speakers have given us the perfect start in terms of what needs to change. I like the fact that we ended on a note of impatience, let's say. We can't wait for yet another COP and then discuss a little bit more and then have incremental change because it would take too long. We need rapid change and rapid investment, rapid directional change, and that inspires us. So thank you for that. If I could invite maybe a round of applause as this part of our panel comes down. And I will invite the next half of it. You have a double treat this evening. You see, it's not just one set, but a double set of amazingly inspirational speakers. If I could invite the second half of our panelists to come up. Her Excellency Azucena Arreleche, Minister of Economy and Finance of Uruguay. His Excellency Hani Sewilam, Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation of Egypt. And Miss Elizabeth Simadala, President of the East African Farmers Association. Thank you, whoever corrected me there. It was very helpful. So a super powerful second half of this conversation. Let me, of course, start, Madam Minister, with you. As the Minister of Economy and Finance of Uruguay, obviously, we heard just how important redirecting investments into where they are needed, especially towards the vulnerable, especially the agri-food systems, solutions are. And we would be really delighted to sort of begin to take this conversation from the macro level to the country level and to hear your thoughts on how do we make this transition, this agri-food system transition without turning it into what President Alvaro said was a false dichotomy or trichotomy of economy versus climate versus ecosystems. So if I could give the floor to you. Yes, please feel free to take the podium up there. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much, FAO, for this invitation. It is a great honor for me, for Uruguay, to participate in this panel with such distinguished colleagues and to discuss this topic, which for my country, Uruguay, is very important. As you may know, food production is very relevant in Uruguay's economic structure. So as Minister of Economy and Finance, it is I'm sure that we are going to have a very fruitful conversation, and it's very interesting to hear from all the colleagues in the panel today. Let me begin sharing what has been Uruguay's key strategy in the way how to combine environmental issues and financial aspects. And as was said before, there is not a dichotomy between people and planet, and both should come together. So I want to share with you the way that Uruguay government has been implementing and how we put the climate agenda in the heart of our economic policies. Uruguay started in October 2021 as co-chair of the Development Committee of the IMF and World Bank to advocate the idea that financial incentives should be put in place if we wanted to move forward in terms of the environmental agenda. So the simple idea was to distinguish amongst the different countries according to the contribution to the what we call global public good. And by global public good, we mean climate, biodiversity, and food security. The simple idea behind this is to distinguish the cost of borrowing of different countries in relation to the contribution to the environmental behavior that countries have. So in that sense, we have taken very concrete results because, as we like to say, we want to walk the talk and not just mention COP after COP that we are interested in this topic, so that we are facing this or that challenge. So I specifically want to mention tonight two financial innovative instruments which shows clearly Uruguay's determination to provide food security to all the world in a sustainable way. And by sustainable way, I mean reducing the methane emission of our cattle, but also considering zero or taking into account zero deforestation. So in October of 2022, Uruguay issued a sovereign sustainability-linked bond. This is a bond that embeds a two-way structure. The interest rate is linked to key performance indicators, environmental key performance indicators that come from our NDC-1 from the Paris Agreement. If Uruguay doesn't reach those targets, then Uruguay is penalized and we pay a step up. That is, we have to pay a higher interest payment. On the contrary, and this is the most important feature of the bond, if Uruguay outperforms its targets, then we receive a reward, and Uruguay has a step down in the coupon that it pays. This was the first structure ever in the world to... Okay, sorry, I was just looking at what you were looking. I thought I had a presentation. I was surprised about that. It could be the case, but my team could have the presentation there. Sorry. So going back to this bond, to this structure, this was the first time ever that Uruguay made the NDCs financially binding, because up to now, the different countries, we had presented our commitments according to Paris Agreement, but there was no consequence. These commitments, they were not binding. So this was the first time that we had these financially binding conditions in NDCs, and this was the first time that a country is rewarded if it has a good environmental behavior. The second instrument that I would like to mention today, and that is very much related to the topic of this panel, is a recent loan that was approved by the board of the World Bank 1 or 2 weeks ago. And this loan is very interesting because in this case, the interest rate is also linked to a key performance indicator. In this case, it comes from also from the Paris Agreement, and it refers to the reduction of methane emissions, and which, as I said at the beginning, is very important because Uruguay has a very important livestock production. So if Uruguay outperforms this ambitious target of reduction of methane emissions, then we receive a reward. And this is very important because it goes in line with the idea Uruguay has a comparative advantage in livestock production. And we are going to continue with this cattle production, but we are going to increase the productivity of our livestock. So this has been a very important cornerstone, a very important point in, I would say, the way in which we tie these two elements together. Food production in a sustainable way. This innovative sovereign sustainability-linked loan would allow a decline, a step down in our interest rate of 1 percentage point, which is a lot. Our interest rate could decline in 1 percentage point, which means that over the whole maturity of the loan, this could give us savings for around $12.5 million. And it is very important that all these savings, these eventual savings, are going to be channeled to a fund that will finance climate-smart agricultural projects. So again, we begin to put these things together. Uruguay is the first country that has this instrument with the World Bank, but the idea from the World Bank is to be able to replicate this and to have this approach where countries are incentivized to provide global public goods on a much larger scale. Let me stand out that the design and the implementation of this loan has involved a very strong coordination amongst the Ministries of Environment, Economy and Finance, and Livestock, as was the case when we issued the bond in October 2021. And we have had a very close collaboration with the World Bank in the design of this loan, and also with the United Nations Development Programme, specifically it what refers to measuring and verifying what we measure both in the bond and in the loan. So let me finish by saying that as a food supplier to the growing world population, Uruguay intends to meet the challenge of boosting livestock production and productivity, which is an integral part of our economic fabric, while reducing the intensity of methane emissions and preserving our unique grassland ecosystem and native forests. And just a final point to finish my remarks. We said that it's important to walk the talk, and we think that every part should walk the talk. And in that sense, we think it would be very important if the concessional part in this kind of financial instruments, whether it is the bond that I mentioned before, or whether it is the loans, the loan from the World Bank that I mentioned, or I just, a couple of hours ago, I spoke in an IDB panel about an instrument that also has a concessional part. It would be very positive, we think, if the concessional part comes from developed countries. So this would be an opportunity for developed countries to put resources into this transition to a decarbonized world. We think that this could be a way in which we can all walk the talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Minister. I think we're all inspired by that. That's really is an amazing array. I mean, you've, as you said, you are walking the talk, putting the climate agenda at the heart of your economic policies, and through instruments that are eminently replicable elsewhere. They're ones based on the right financial incentives. They're the ones that are based on performance, and therefore hold us accountable to the processes and planning and policies and promises made, including through the NDCs. And ultimately, it helps to produce more with less. And so, well, I am very inspired and really delighted that you have taken the time to share that with us this evening. Thank you. Next, we have the pleasure of inviting His Excellency Hani Sewilam to offer some remarks to us, the Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation of Egypt. We've talked a lot, sir, about this sort of interlinkages, climate and biodiversity and food security, and there's a common element there, a critical element, that is water, and we look forward to hearing your remarks.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Yes, water should be at the heart of climate actions. And I'm really very happy that water and agriculture and food are becoming more topics in the rooms and the discussions. And it's not only about energy and CO2 emission, because really water, food are very impacted and connected to climate. And I think this should be the COP era of water and food. We started last year in Sharm el-Sheikh in the COP27, pushing water and food very hard to be on the climate agenda. And I think the success of the COP27, of at least in the cover decision of the COP27, having water cited 5 times, adaptation is becoming a central topic, but also the loss and damage came also as one of the concepts that we were well recognized in the previous COP, and hopefully we are going to continue that. So please continue such a kind of discussions in the COP to further push the water, food, and agriculture to be considered more. And we should also speak loud, not only to be heard in the room. The negotiators should hear what we are talking about so that they can reflect this in the decisions out of the COP. This was my first message in this very important session. Speaking of people, climate, and nature, and also like my colleague here, Excellency, the Minister, I ran out of presentations and I ran out of speeches. So my team didn't write any speech for this session. So I'm just going to speak just from some notes I took today while listening to you. Speaking of water, as a water expert and somebody who worked in the water sector for many years, I just would like to think about the water footprint, for example. What happened with the water footprint? These are the concepts that we have been discussing for many years now. But we still produce wheat with 1,200 liters per kilogram. We still use 400 liters of water to produce 1 kilo tomato with the traditional agriculture. But we kept many years speaking about producing more with less water footprint, and still our breakfast consumes a couple of thousands of liters of water. That has to be changed. But why it's not changing? That's a very important question that we have to ask ourselves. Small-scale farmers are not able to afford the technology that we are proposing. Modern irrigations, even the drip irrigation that has been there for many years, it's not affordable by the small-scale farmers. And I hope my colleague will speak more on behalf of the small-scale farmers. So we have to find a low-cost, low-tech technology for such small-scale farmers because their business model is different. So if you try to apply precision agriculture for small-scale farmers, it doesn't work. So we have to come out of this kind of innovation that's not applicable, that does not reach the farmers, not only because they are not having the right capacity to run such technologies, but also they don't have the money to implement that. And if you afford it and you implement it, the business model will not work, because the cost of such a technology is quite high for the farmers. The concept of green water and blue water, that's all the concept that we have been talking about. And I just give you one example. The problem between Egypt and Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. I'm not going to go in this topic. But the issue is, the Nile Basin countries, they have 7,000 billion cubic meters of rain. The 11 countries, they have inside their borders 7,000 billion cubic meter of green water. And you know, the entire story of Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan is about 74 billion. So you have 7,000 billion cubic meter of water, of green water, and you are fighting and struggling for 74 billion cubic meter of blue water. So the potential of green water has to be utilized. We have to think about different approaches of rain-fed agriculture, how to harvest water with a low-tech in order to enable small-scale farmers to make use of such an amount of water. So that's another issue that I wanted to present. The third point is innovation. Innovation for water recycling has to be cheaper. Desalination for agriculture has to be topic on the agenda. And many people will be surprised, are we going to desalinate water and going to cost a bottle of water, I don't know, a couple of pounds or $0.5 or whatever? Are we going to use this water for agriculture? Are we going to desalinate the seawater to have it in such bottles and go for agriculture? No, absolutely not. We just need to see what happened in the labs. Innovation is there. Research has reached a lot in using fertigated type of desalination to separate water from the salt. But what is the problem? The problem that we have technology readiness level from 1 to 9, and the researchers are working, and then once they reach the level of 6, and they need to upscale it, the things are dying here and ending by having a patent or paper published, but no one is investing because of the risk. No one is investing in having such a technology from the lab and going outside to have a pilot, semi-commercial, and then to commercialize and have it at a technology readiness level number 9, and then you have it in the market. There is a lot of research. Just Google desalination for agriculture, forward osmosis, fertigated desalination. All of these technologies can be a revolution. And why I'm saying we have to focus in the COP about water and agriculture, because the focus on energy had made a huge change. I mean, today, Egypt signing contracts for photovoltaic, the PV panels are per kilowatt hour, $2.3 per kilowatt hour. This is 10% of the price that we paid 10 years ago. This must happen for the water sector. We have to have a revolution in the R&D, but not only the R&D, the policy. Remember the feed-in tariff approach, which is about policy. They didn't pay money for it. It's feed-in tariff. It's a policy, changing policy in the countries, had made a revolution in the energy sector. This must happen in the water sector as well in the future. That's why we need to speak loud about water and climate change, water and food, food and agriculture. So innovation should not be only technological innovation. Innovation in the governance, in the legislation, is very important. I give you one example from Egypt. We do have also small-scale farmers. Most of our agriculture is based on small-scale farmers, very small. We speak about 0.1, 0.2 hectare per farmer or per family. And whatever you can do, you cannot really make it profitable for the farmers. You keep subsidizing all the time. So we changed the water law recently in order to create legal water user association. So a water user association so that they can have a bank account, they can have an election, they will be recognized from the country, etc., etc. And with having it legally, legal framework for having water user associations at the farm level and then go to the main canal, or having another water user association and go to the governorate, you have a council at the city level, and then you go to the prime minister or the national council. So we have a connection from the farm to the prime minister. We can have a bottom-up approach or top-down approach based on the challenges and solutions. But this has created land consolidation. So we were able in some areas to bring farmers together. The 0.1, the 0.2, the 0.3 hectares, we bring them together and you have big area so that they can do the farming processes together. They buy the seeds, they sell the product at the end. So the business model has changed in these areas and it became more profitable. Then they can move from furrow irrigation to modern irrigation systems because they have a community, and it makes sense because having a complete system with valve and filter and pump for a small farm, it doesn't make sense. But when it's bigger, it makes more sense to have it. So changing the law, changing the governance, modifying it in an innovative approaches could make a big difference. My last point is capacity and building the capacity. One of the very important initiatives that came out of the COP27, and it's the global initiative that's called AWARE, Action for Water Adaptation and Resilience. The one similar to FAST that came in the agriculture, this came in the water. And the Egyptian government, we pushed to have a huge center in Egypt to host all the African engineers and professionals, technicians who are working directly with farmers to be trained on adaptation to climate change. Because the poor farmers are not having the knowledge how to deal with the climate change. The season is shifting. The seeds are not suitable anymore for this type of temperature. So you need new varieties. You need also to show them what is the meaning of seasonal shift, when to irrigate, when to start, when to harvest. All of these, what sometimes sounds basic knowledge, but for the farmers, it's very important to survive, especially the small scale ones. So we offer this training center, a huge center from the government. We are now raising funds for programs. We just need to develop programs, invite trainees from different African countries in order to train them in Egypt. So the water footprint, we need to rethink again. The green and blue water innovation. Innovation must not be always technological. And finally, capacity building, capacity building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. My personal opinion is that you should always speak off the cuff. It's a fabulous tour de force of an intervention. But I mean, you brought back into the conversation the issue of not quite having the right incentives for the small-scale farmers. We talked about the broader incentives, but it goes all the way down to the farm level. The incentives are not there for the change that's mentioned. Of course, part of that is around technology and making technology available, the building of the capacities, as you mentioned. But even there, it can't end there, because it has to be not just about technology, but about its implementation, about its uptake, to make the kind of differences that you mentioned, including, as you said, for a water revolution. I like that. We will definitely take as part of a water revolution like we had in a way in the energy sector. So thank you very much. Our third speaker is the President of the East African Farmers Federation, Ms. Elizabeth Simadala. Not just the President of the East African Farmers Federation, but also an agripreneur and a smallholder farmer. The perfect combination to take it all the way from the policy level to really where it matters. Madam, we would really be delighted to hear your perspective, because as I say, you sit here at the COP with the global conversations going on. You're also there where it matters at the field level, bringing it all to life. So your perspectives will really enrich our conversation for this evening. If I could invite you to please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. And let me start by appreciating FAO for inviting farmers to be part of such interesting discussion. And it's important for us because you cannot discuss agri-food system transformation without bringing farmers into the discussion. And right from the first speaker to the last speaker, everyone has mentioned a farmer at least more than 3 times. So what does that mean? That a farmer is central when it comes to food systems transformation. We are at the heart and we are the backbone of food systems transformation. But it's also very interesting that everyone understands that the farmers need support. But when it comes to access to financing, we've had, and I mean it's very clear, only 0.3% of climate financing is accessible by the smallholder farmer. So meaning there is a problem. And where is the problem? Because the farmer usually takes the raw deal when it comes to decision making, when it comes to resource allocation. We are never invited on that table where decisions are being made and where the cake is being shared on who takes what. And the challenge is because we have so many intermediaries that are speaking on behalf of the farmers. So many phantom organizations in form of civil society organizations, in form of NGOs, in form of the research, in form of the extension, but also some government officials. They speak on behalf of the farmers. And as farmers, so we are here to say that we are tired. We are tired of people speaking for us because we've invested in our own organizations. We are structured right from the grassroots to the subnational level, to the national level, to the regional level, to the continental level, and at the global level. And our structuring is in a way that every structure is able to relate with the governance structure, with the political governance structure. At subnational level, where we have, let's say, sub-counties in countries, where we have sub-counties, where we have districts, we've had, let's say, district farmers associations, we've had sub-county cooperatives like the area cooperative enterprises, we've had unions, we've had the national level organizations, and then we have the regional organizations that interact with the regional economic communities and the continental organizations that interact with the African Union Commission. And we've had opportunities to sit in some of those committees where we are supposed to occupy that space and bring out the views of the farmers. We've invested in governance, in building the capacity of the leaders to be able to voice out the concerns of the members. And we understand issues. We've invested in professional management systems where we are accountable. We've built partnerships. A case in point on climate issues. We've built partnerships with ICRA. We've built partnerships with AGNES, the Africa group of network expert negotiators for the continent. Package is the Pan-Africa Climate Justice Alliance. That is a civil society organization that also works on climate change in Africa. Then, of course, we've tried to mobilize resources from different organizations to be able to support our work. And we've tried to fit ourselves in understanding these entire processes. For example, we've done a study on the 5 last COPs to be able to understand all the decisions on agriculture for the last 5 years. We've been able to come up with roadmaps towards COP processes. We had a roadmap towards Sharm el-Sheikh process. We had a roadmap towards COP28. So for us, we are not coming in just at COP to present our issues. It is something we've been working on right after Sharm el-Sheikh. We had a meeting to unpack the decisions of Sharm el-Sheikh. We mapped out all the important meetings that we needed to engage. We were in bond during the Substar meetings to be able to make sure that we contribute in some of those meetings. And we held consultations before we came to COP in Dubai. We had our call to action on the priorities for the farmers. But also, most importantly, we've contributed. For example, everyone is here speaking about the Emirates Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems, and Climate Action. But we've been part of the reference group for food systems that has been putting together that Emirates Declaration. So what do I mean? That we have the capacity to speak for ourselves. We have the capacity to make decisions. We have the capacity to innovate. We have the capacity to co-create. We have the capacity to implement projects. And we have the capacity to do business because we are the private sector. And collectively, we are the biggest private sector globally because we produce more than 80% in global value of the food that we eat. But what do we need to do going forward? When you look at some of the interventions and some of the innovations that we've developed, they are too small to create a change that we need in food transformation. I think the previous speakers talked about some of the innovations like the drip irrigation, which has been here for a long time, but farmers don't afford that. It's not that they don't afford that, but it's because the financing is very expensive. When you look at the investments that farmers have already done, that we do on a daily basis, and when you look at the impact that we face due to climate change, I think we face the biggest brunt. Because the agriculture sector in Africa is not cushioned at all. There are no subsidies. There are few countries that can stand here and say that they are giving subsidies to the farmers in Africa. So we need to profile some of these innovations and make sure that we put them to scale. We need to build the capacity, continue building the capacity of our farmers, continue building the skills. We need to make sure that the farmers are able to access the technologies and the innovations, and we can do that by building partnerships with the private sector. We need everyone. We need private-public producer partnerships to be able to transform the food systems. And again, we need to look at the credit bit of it. We need to be able to have financing that is accessible, but also affordable. Currently, what is on the market is more than 18% interest rate from most of the commercial banks. Can we have a single-digit financing for the smallholder farmers? Then when it comes to the issue of markets, we need to see transparency in markets. I think everyone is talking about credit, for example, carbon markets. But is there transparency in the carbon markets? It's not there. We need to see that kind of transparency. Everyone is talking about World Trade Organization. The World Trade rules do not really favor countries, especially from the global south. So we end up exporting unfinished products, the raw materials. So can we have a fairness which will allow us to be able to export finished products? Then, of course, we need to invest and promote intra-African trade, especially coming from Africa, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Our friends in Europe have introduced the European Green Deal. And this Green Deal is introducing extra requirements. These extra requirements, it's been already hard for farmers in Africa to export to Europe. But with the introduction of this Green Deal, the extra requirements, the chemical sustainability strategy, for example, the farm-to-fork strategy, the forest deforestation, the deforestation regulation, which are introducing extra requirements, then it means you're locking us out of the market. So we need to also invest in, trying to build the intra-African trade so that we can focus on trading amongst ourselves. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, to some degree, a further dose of reality, of the reality faced by farmers. And you ended on the market access issue, which reminds us why, you know, dealing with agriculture is not quite as simple as dealing with, say, energy. It's not just about reducing emissions. This is about food and livelihoods and a much more complex picture that we have ahead of us. The transition, the transformation, it's a difficult one, but it's an important one. The just element, as President Alvaro said, as our Director General also mentioned, is going to be vital. We're delighted that you feel that to some degree, certainly within the COP processes, which are so important, that the voice is being heard, and what was launched at COP27, which really is a success, you know, that put us onto the road that we have now, that sealed the evolution of the Coronivia process, which had agriculture and food security in the heart of conversation of negotiations, evolved that into the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work, which is another great achievement, and now evolves further, the declaration, and what's most important is what we do after the COP with its implementation. So thank you really for bringing that reality back to us. It's an amazing panel. Really, the insights of tonight are spectacular. It was very much worth everyone's while. We have a little bit of time for a few comments. I would suggest, or questions. I would suggest we keep our questions brief, because we want to squeeze as much as is absolutely possible from these unbelievably brilliant panelists that have stayed with us this evening. So please introduce yourselves. And then your question, and if you need who it's directed to, we'll take 2 or 3, and then we will take it from there.
Hey, thank you for your speeches. I have a question about Africa, 2 questions actually. I'm a senior research fellow at Max Planck Society, one of the institutes. I will just keep it as short as possible. So I was wondering how welcoming is the farmers when it comes to seed technologies, because now African Union is trying to promote CRISPR-Cas kind of technologies, and I know that there's kind of a resistance about that. I wonder how farmers would welcome if Africa itself produces it. And secondly, I'm curious about how the working conditions of farmers, because from my country, I'm from Turkey, I know that they are the most vulnerable group, literally, because 90% of them are not considered proper workers because they just work seasonally, so the agreements are very bad and their conditions are the worst. So I was just wondering. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll take the next one from that side.
Thank you. My name is Susan Payne. I'm the co-founder of a company called Sustainable Planet, growing plant protein on non-arable land. Elizabeth, absolutely agree with actually everything you said. I'm on the board of the African Agricultural Council for African agriculture, and the one thing that we talk about relentlessly is the lack of funding available across Africa, and I think it is shocking. And I think we have to look very closely and ask governments and DFIs to engage much more actively to provide funding for farmers under the amount of $5 million. And my question is actually not to you, because what you said I agree with wholeheartedly. But what I think we have to do, and speak to anybody in this room, is to try and engage governments, first and foremost, but DFIs also, to figure out, and I have many ideas, to get a template together that is really simple, that will allow smallholders and small farmers to somehow become funded, because right now, these rates are so onerous and so draconian that without funding, I'm not sure how we're going to get off ground zero. And that is a serious problem. But certainly, I so agree with you. And I bought farms in Africa to be at the front line so I myself could feel it, and I feel it. I understand it.
Thank you so much. Should we take one more, and whoever
Hi, this is Peter Goldstein from Heifer International. I have a question for Minister Arbalechi. I think you brought up a critical issue, which is to increase the sustainability of the livestock sector, something we're very involved in. I was wondering if you might be able to elaborate a little bit about how UAGRE is going about that, what methods are being followed to address that issue. Thank you.
One more. We can take one more, just so we. She is the chooser, okay? Leave her.
Thank you. Max Weiss, Plant-Based Treaty. So we hear a lot about transforming the agricultural system. We hear, we're asking the question, how can we produce more with less? We're talking about water revolution. And the science is very clear on that. We need to rapidly reduce the number of farmed animals on this planet. We must reduce urgently the consumption of meat. Yet, the minister from Uruguay saying we have to boost livestock production. How is it possible? How is it possible to have such a contradicting stance on the science? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we have four good questions for us to pick up. Should we start with Elizabeth? Would you like to pick up on the seed technologies and the various things that were directed in your direction?
Yeah. Yes. I think it's on. So on the seed technologies, I don't think there is a bit of resistance, but what is lacking is information. Because it's what I was talking about. You don't have to sit somewhere under air-conditioned rooms and think that you're going to think on behalf of farmers. You have to engage farmers. Even with the research, that's why most of the researches have not been implemented. Most of the research results have not been implemented because researchers are working in silos. And yet it's the farmers that are supposed to implement their results on the field. So there is no resistance from the farmers, but the farmers don't have the information. And so without the information, we don't have to take on everything that is brought on our plate. So this is why we are saying we need to engage and involve farmers. We need to work in partnerships so that even the researchers, they are farmer-led. We have the ideas, we have the knowledge, we have the information, but then how do we put this information into science? You need to work with us. Then on the subsistence nature of our agriculture, most of our farmers plant or farm on less than 2 hectares. So it doesn't really make a business sense in terms of investments if you're to support agriculture in Africa and looking at supporting individual farmers. But that is the reason why we are formed into farmers associations and cooperatives, so that we can make life easy to anyone who would like to invest in farmers. And for us, we've gone a step further to bring in innovation. We have an innovation called e-granary, which is a virtual cooperative. And this virtual cooperative, what it does is that it collects data on our farmers to know where are our farmers, what is the size of their land, what are they farming, what are their input needs, what are their service needs, and what are they able to produce. So it really addresses all the challenges across the entire value chain. We are able to aggregate their demand instead of having each farmer going to the market to buy a bag of fertilizer or to buy a kilo of seed. Then we aggregate that kind of demand and we do bulk purchase. And by doing that, we are treated as wholesalers and not as retailers. Also in terms of services, we are able to work to a financial partner with a collective number of the farmers that need that kind of service. And we are saying, instead of, for example, a commercial bank having to go to the field to profile each individual member, we already have the profile of the farmers, and we already have the data on what they are producing and what they've been producing per season for the last 4 years. So we are able to provide that information, and it's able to give to act as security. We are trying to be as innovative as possible because financing in Africa especially, you have to have collateral in form of title deeds, which most of our women and young farmers don't have. So to be able to bypass that, then we have data on what they've been producing, and we are able to use that data as collateral to access funding. When it comes to extension, for example, extension is the biggest challenge in Africa. In some countries like Uganda, where I come from, the extension ratio is 1 to 1,500 households, which is impossible. So we've done e-extension, a mix of e-extension and physical extension, where farmers are able to get both voice messages and also SMSs on their phone. We have a call center. They are able to call at our call center and get advice from our agronomists in case there is any challenge in the field. And because we have data on how much they've planted, then we are able to estimate what they are going to produce, and we are able to secure forward contracts, which can as well be used to secure financing. We've worked with private sector actors like ETG to be able to provide us inputs like fertilizer and seed, and at the end, we have contracts with them and we supply them with what the farmers produce. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. It's nice to get into the granularity of the details of how you've solved the financing issue. Minister Arbeleche, I think there's sort of a double question in your way, because there is this real interest in how do you manage to get that funding all the way down? I mean, it's given that there is not enough funding. Certainly climate finance, not enough, is going to agri-food system solutions. That's clear. We've done our analysis, and we'll speak to that during this COP. And how have you managed with these innovative financing instruments to not just secure the funding, but to make sure it really gets into the hands of the farmers on the front lines, if you will, that need it? And of course, it's in your country, livestock is an important part of that. And how do you, in a way, direct the funding so that you have this, I guess, sustainable livestock transformation as well?
Thank you. I think that there are many questions involved about this topic. The one about funding, I think that in the case of Uruguay, for us, it is essential that the funding goes to the farmer. Liquidity is a major challenge always. When we had the COVID-19 in 2020, our main concern was that all small enterprises, whether they were farmers or any small enterprise, that they had the liquidity so that the engines of the economy could keep working. So I think that funding is one aspect that in Uruguay we do care a lot. But maybe the big question raised over here was, is there a contradiction between boosting productivity, livestock productivity, and having a sustainable development, and the answer is no. So what we do, first of all, the important thing is to have a very efficient cattle management. And the positive aspect in livestock production is that the farmer has an incentive to increase productivity. So if you increase productivity, that means that you have a less intensity of methane emissions per kilo of animal, and that means increasing productivity, a higher return for the farmer. So the incentives are aligned, and that is not the case in other sectors. So for us, from the economic point of view, it is something good that you have the right you have incentives to go in the right way in terms of increasing the productivity. So when we refer to the reduction of methane, we are referring to the reduction of the intensity per kilo of animal, of cattle. My second point there is that it is very important, investigation is very important, so that we do have the appropriate management of our cattle. And in that sense, the Ministry of Livestock, together with the INIA, I don't know the name, and here we have somebody from the INIA, Institute of Investigation, Agricultural Investigation, they work together in coming up with ideas of how to increase this productivity. A third level that is very important, and I mentioned before in my remarks, is to have funds for this innovation, to have funds to promote these smart agricultural projects. So in that sense, it is very important that we are creating in Uruguay a fund that is the resources for this fund come from the savings that we have from the bond we issued. If we have a step down, if we pay less interest in the bond we issued, those savings go to the fund. The savings that eventually come from the loan that we will disburse from the World Bank, those resources also go to the fund. The fund is also, we allocate resources from our budget to the fund. And of course, here I invite anybody that wants to, any institution that wants to deploy resources into this fund to put it. And that this comes with the idea that more developed countries should try to put the money where the mouth is. Really, if they care about this, this is an opportunity to put resources in a fund of this type. And my final point, the fourth level I would say, is that all of this investigation has to reach the farmer. So we have in Uruguay a long tradition of working directly with the farmers, not from my ministry, but from the other ministries and from the private sector itself. They are organized in different groups and they work together. If I may, a final point not related to this question, but related to what the president of the Farmers Federation mentioned about access to market. I mentioned the idea of positive incentives in terms of borrowing cost. That means those that have a better environmental behavior should have a lower cost of funding. But we also propose that those that have a better environmental behavior do have a better access to markets. That is something very important. We have spoken about this with the Secretary General of the World Trade Organization, because it is the case today that countries, as our GDP increases, we lost the access to preferred schemes in terms of accessing markets. So the same idea that I presented with the cost of funding is applicable to access to markets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Finally, let's hear from Minister Hani. Minister Hani, if you could pull all of the strands together from tonight's conversation in these last few minutes, over to you.
Because I also mentioned it in my talk, there are technologies that enables us to produce more with less. But my comment was that these technologies are not suitable for small-scale farmers, the farmers that we know in Africa, because we are not always with the nice tie. I mean, we go and sit with farmers and see how they work and how they live, and we sit with them and we discuss with them and we have sessions with farmers. So recirculating aquaculture system today can produce more than 300 kilograms of fish in 1 cubic meter of water. So technologies are there. Aquaponics and hydroponics are well-known technologies in the market, are not new. And even the FAO, they have guidelines for hydroponics and aquaponics and RAS systems. All of these are existing in the market that can, but these are not the ones that fits the small-scale farmers. And since we have the topic people here, and the socioeconomic dimension has to be considered. But there is a technology in the market that enables us to do that. Farmers, in the small-scale sense, in the African sense, in the Egyptian sense, they need low-cost, low-tech. That's the small-scale farmers, what they need. And then they need the funding, they need the capacity building and all what was said. So that's the difference between technology and precision agriculture and small-scale farmer. That's the big difference that we have always to think of. But let us keep discussing water, food, and agriculture in this COP and the next COPs to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, as you see, we're being invited to leave, so I won't wrap up the conversation. It was incredibly rich, not just in terms of identifying the big barriers that still remain, and we have to be honest, there are many, to do with technology, to do with finance, but also we heard about real solutions that are getting real money out of the capital markets, solutions on the ground, solutions in terms of making that technology appropriate and encouraging its uptake. It's about getting the incentives right and always having at the center of the conversation, of course, the farmers, who ultimately this is all about. If I could finish there and just invite another round of applause for an amazing panel for this evening.